Ever find yourself holding on to negative emotions, negative energies from the past, and no matter how hard you try, no matter what you do, you just can't seem to let it go? Well, in today's video, we want to help you with that. We're going to be talking about letting go, the pathway of surrender.
So the rope touches my left heel.
With peppers, onions.
Circadian health. More importantly, we're going to be talking about what's going on, my wellness warriors. Welcome back to the MME YouTube channel, where we're here to help you develop a healthy mind and keep your body aligned. My name is Tyler Egan, and I will be your wellness mentor and educator for today's video. And in today's video, as the introduction implied, as you can probably see on the whiteboard behind me here, we're going to be talking about letting go, the pathway of surrender. And this video idea came from a book that I have read, I've listened to. I do audiobooks. I don't read really much. That I've listened to. I've probably listened to this audiobook, if I had to put a number on it, like 24 times. It has transformed my life in so many different ways. And I want to share one of the basic understandings from the book with you all today, because I know for a fact, just by watching this video, even if you don't understand what I'm saying after consuming this video today, just by watching this video, it will change. It'll shift something inside of you. And you'll see that as the days come down the road, if that makes sense. So how the video is going to work is, first things first, cheers. We're going to hydrate a little bit. My glass of water is almost empty. I've tried to film this about 8 or 9 times and I keep messing up. So I keep drinking more water. So hydrate, 1, 2. We're going to go over a quick definition, which I have written on the board behind me. Some common misconceptions about letting go or surrender. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is the mechanism behind it. So how it actually works. So if you're one of those, if you're somebody like me who are just like, come on, bro, like the information's cool. Like I love information, but like, what am I supposed to do? Come on, give me something here. You know, there'll be timestamps down below. You can skip ahead of that part. But I want to encourage you to stick around for the educational side of things, because some of the common misconceptions, when you have an awareness around those, it's much easier to avoid falling prey to those in a sense. So let's get into this. Let's start with our definition. I think I covered everything. If you take anything from today's video, if you like the content we're putting out there, I would really appreciate y'all if the train is going by. Hold on. I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel. If you're feeling extremely ambitious, click the notification bell so you're notified every time we put out new content. Last time I checked, we're about a couple subscribers away from 50 subscribers, which I guess sounds like a small amount in the grand scheme of things, but apparently on YouTube, once we hit 50 subscribers, we can start doing live streams, which I'm excited about. So if you can help us reach 50 subscribers, that would be sick. So if you're not subscribed already, click the subscribe, send it to a friend or whatever that might help, you guys know what to do. Okay, so let's get into the video. Surrender. What do we mean? So what we're defining as surrender is letting go of resisting, controlling, or manipulating thoughts, emotions, or circumstances. So think about some of the things that are going on in your life. Think about intrusive thoughts that you typically have, right? Or emotions or energies that show up for you. They're just like uncomfortable, like guilt and shame. Like, I don't know about any of you, but earlier in my life, when I would feel guilt, I would resist it. I would fight against it, right? I would be like, no, I don't want to feel that. I'll do anything. I'll use escape. I'll suppress it, anything to that effect, right? Think about some of these things for a moment. Think about some of the thoughts that show up. Maybe like your own inner critic, your own inner hater. What does that version of you sound like in here? Those penetrating thoughts that like they feel like it's like a dagger into your brain in a sense. Or some of the circumstances that you don't like. Something happens at work. You know, something happens with your family. You're stuck in traffic. And then immediately what starts to happen is thoughts and emotions start to arise, right? So you're stuck in traffic, you're already running late to work, whatever it is, maybe you start to feel a little bit of guilt because you could have gotten up earlier, or you start to feel a little bit of frustration because of all the traffic. And then the thoughts show up like, well, if that one person would have learned how to drive, then they wouldn't have caused the traffic jam, So like what we're doing in this scenario that I'm explaining here is we are in a sense resisting what we're feeling by trying to control or manipulate the circumstance, right? So if there's traffic, mentally we can try to manipulate the situation to make ourselves feel better. So that right there is an example of resistance. And I just wanted to kind of paint the picture of that, because sometimes these things aren't black and white inside of our own mental framework, right? So basic understanding of surrender, letting go of resisting, controlling, or manipulating thoughts, emotions, and circumstances. So what we want to do is we want to allow feelings and emotions to rise within us without suppressing them, without escaping from them, and without judgment of them, right? So like you have going back to the example, you're stuck in traffic. You could have gotten up earlier. You could have, you could have got the kids ready sooner. You could have showered the night before, like whatever's showing up in your mind right now. We allow the feelings to arise without suppressing them, without judging them. But the second we go into judgment mode with all of our opinions about ourselves or what we could have done better or what we should have done better, the could haves and should haves are the opinions I'm referencing here. We're going into judgment mode, and that is immediately putting us out of surrender and into resistance. You following what I'm saying? So the second you start could having and should having yourself is when you are resisting what is unfolding in the moment, what you're feeling in the moment. Maybe you feel ashamed of your behavior. Maybe you feel guilty. Maybe you feel sad. Maybe you feel frustrated. But when we start saying, I should have done this, should have done that, the judgment start to arise, we are leaving surrender and going into resistance, right? So the key to surrender then, we could say, is allowing, right? You follow me? Okay, so just understand letting go of surrender is letting go of resisting, controlling, or manipulating thoughts, emotions, and circumstances. It's not just about the circumstances itself. How are you Here's a question for you, for all my people out there who like to write notes down. Here's a question, not to answer, but to sit with. How are you resisting, controlling, or manipulating? Sorry, the train's going by. How are you resisting, controlling, or manipulating? Let's just remove circumstances for a moment, because we can see, feel, touch, and taste those. What we can't see, feel, touch, and taste is our thoughts and emotions sometimes. So how are you resisting, or how am I, is the question, how am I resisting, controlling, or manipulating my thoughts and emotions? How am I resisting, controlling, or manipulating my own thoughts and emotions? If you have intrusive thoughts and you don't like the way it feels when you have intrusive thoughts, it's very easy to resist, control, or manipulate them. Like, no, stop thinking that way. Turns on the television, grabs the phone, escape, right? Goes and gets drunk, like whatever it is, okay? So now let's talk about some of the common misconceptions. And this is really important to understand because we want to understand what surrender looks like, what it is and what it isn't. Because we're talking about something that is more of a feeling, more of an experience. Releasing and surrendering old energies, old emotions, trauma is more of an experience and a feeling rather than something we can put into words. But what we're doing here is we're trying to put it into words. Okay, so some of the common misconceptions is avoiding. Yeah, we'll go with purple. It's my favorite color. Avoidance. Wait, hold please. Now I need another color. Misconceptions. All right, so like I said, the first one is avoidance. It is not being avoidant. So we all know the people in our lives who seem like they have it, they're chill, they let go of things really easily, but they actually could just have avoidant behavior. And this is not to pass judgment on anybody. This is just to simply state a fact. They could just have avoidant behavior. They avoid circumstances that would trigger them, whereas maybe you don't. And so then you take it all on. You carry it around with you, right? You don't let it go. So that's why you're here, because you understand how to let it go. And the key to that is not avoiding. That does not mean avoiding tough conversations. That does not mean avoiding tough circumstances. It does not mean avoiding doing tough, challenging things. What that means is accepting. My favorite way of putting this is unwavering acceptance. So I'm just kind of put it up here. Unwavering acceptance. Forgot the T. I apologize for the way that looks. Unwavering acceptance for what is. So what I mean is, maybe you feel guilty or ashamed for your actions. Maybe you feel sad or depressed or lonely. Like, think about some of the dark, deeper, ugly, negative energies or emotions that many of us, and I'm not trying to pass judgment on anybody, many of us want to avoid because they suck, they're uncomfortable, and we don't like them. I get it. I've been there most of my life. But instead, when we're surrendering to what is, we are accepting what is. We are accepting what is. And it is so that simple. If you just allow for a moment yourself to feel guilty, One of my favorite ways of doing this is I'm closing my eyes right now, putting my hand on my heart, I'll be like, Tyler, and I say my first name, because our first name is one of those things that bypasses the conscious mind and will go immediately to the subconscious mind and grab your attention. You ever notice when you're in public, someone says your name, they might not even be talking to you, but they say your name and it grabs your attention right away? Whereas they might be like, hey, they don't get your attention, because our names are one of those things that grab our attention so quickly. So I'll say, Tyler, you're allowed to feel ashamed in my body. And I'm talking to that little kid, that story of mine that I have that's in here. And already, even though I wasn't feeling ashamed, I actually feel like I just released a little bit of shame. Because what I'm doing is I'm creating the space for it to be okay, for myself to feel that. And what I'm doing is I'm not avoiding it by pushing it aside. It's like, no, you shouldn't feel ashamed. You didn't do anything wrong. You shouldn't feel ashamed. No, it doesn't matter what I should or shouldn't do. I feel ashamed right now. So what I'm going to do is have unwavering acceptance for what is, and that is that I feel ashamed right now. Okay? Now, moving on to misconception number 2. So that's number 1. That's number 2. Being passive or weakness. That couldn't be further from the truth. Letting go or surrendering what you're feeling. Because what we're talking about here is surrendering the feelings, not carrying around that energy anymore, not carrying around the feelings of shame, not carrying around the feelings of embarrassment, of guilt, right? Of sadness, of anger. That's what we're talking about here. And this can be seen as being passive or weak, but that is not true at all. It actually requires a tremendous amount of inner fortitude, inner strength to surrender to or surrender the emotions. Because let's look at this for a moment. Right? So surrender could be viewed as weak or passive, and you're not being passive at all, right? Let's just use an example in an everyday life situation. If it's at work or something like that, a coworker's triggering you, and they got you all worked up, frustrated, angry, or they're not listening to you or something like that. And one way of looking at it is the passive side is, well, I'm going to avoid the situation. Kind of the same thing, avoidance. But I'm not going to confront the person, right? Because maybe you're afraid of confrontation. There's a fear there. They're going to make you look silly or stupid, whatever it is. But if you just sit with what you're feeling, I feel frustrated. What else am I feeling? I feel stupid. I don't want to feel stupid, right? And you just feel that. You allow it to come up and you feel it in its entirety or what is surfacing. That requires a tremendous amount of inner strength, inner fortitude, to feel and move through. And then once you feel and move through the situation, you don't have to be passive or weak about it at all, right? You don't have to be passive aggressive or anything like that. Once you surrender what you're feeling, what you're supposed to do will be very clear. Having that tough conversation with the coworker will be I'm not going to say easy, but it'll be much easier than it would have been if you tried to do it from a state of frustration, because now you're not carrying around the frustration or anger or whatever it is for you with you into the conversation. Instead, you have surrendered it and you're coming into it with a clear head and a full heart. All right? So it is not passive, nor is it weakness to surrender to what is. That's what we're talking about. Surrendering what is. Surrendering to what is. What you're feeling. The emotions that you're experiencing. And now the last misconception is probably my favorite, because the definition, this might contradict something here, is the last one is number 3. What was it? Losing control. And the truth of the matter is actually quite the opposite. So the idea here is when we start to practice, we'll lose control because we're not trying to do more things. You following me? But this is all a part of the egoic structures that we've all created inside of our own minds. Because the truth of the matter is, the more we surrender, we don't lose control. We actually gain a tremendous amount of control because we gain a sense of inner freedom, because we're not being controlled or manipulated by old emotions, by old patterns. Just think about this for a minute. When you are being controlled by your own old trauma patterns, energy patterns, old emotional patterns, it's much easier for you to be manipulated by the world around you, because all somebody has to do is trigger you. We know what kind of response we're going to get. So the more you can surrender that, the more you don't lose control at all. You actually regain control because you have more of a state of inner freedom, or my favorite way of putting this is inner peace. Again, to come back to my last example of the inner strength or fortitude, you have the state of inner peace with a clear mind and a full heart, because you're not being blocked by the old energies or emotions from the past. And what this actually allows us to do is, because what the part of us that feels like we're losing control is the egoic structures. The ego feels like it's losing control. And so what surrender actually allows us to do is transcend the ego. So the misconceptions, avoidance, being passive or weak, or losing control are all completely fucking false, right? What surrender actually allows us to do is be more accepting. Now, let me be very clear about this, because if you're watching this right now, you might be watching this more from like the intellectual conscious mind, where you'd be like, you know what, that makes sense. Now, when you get into doing the actual work, we're going to talk about the mechanism in a moment here. When you're doing the work on these things, and if you already know, drop a comment down below if this resonates with you. It's not always that easy. Like if you've been suppressing or repressing, let's say, shame or guilt since you were 10 and you're 37, we're talking about 27 years of suppressed emotions. It starts with, in this moment, can you allow some of that shame or guilt to come up? And then because it's been suppressed for a long time, it might either, one, take a long time, or two, if it all comes up right now, it's going to be heavy, it's going to be dense, and it's probably going to feel like someone is gouging your eyes out and just gutting you like a fish. And I don't mean to be super gory or graphic, but like ego deaths very much feel that painful. So while we're putting simple words to it, it's not going to feel that way, right? But it does come down to accepting, unwavering accepting of what is. It doesn't make you passive or weak. It creates inner strength, inner peace, inner fortitude, and allows you to transcend the ego to higher levels of consciousness. All right, let me get a water break. Cheers. That was good. I feel good about that. How do you guys feel? Drop a comment down below. How do you feel about that? What's showing up for you? I would really love to hear from you all if you made this far in the video. What's showing up for you as you listen? So I'm getting the chills. So what's showing up for you all? What is showing up for you all after you hear all this? Like any insights, revelations, hell, maybe this information's helping you let go of stuff right now. This happened to me when I've heard some of these things before. It would spark a memory of a time that I actually did release something. Like there were times where I would unconsciously release old emotions, didn't know it, and I'm like, oh my God, I've done this before. It's like, okay, how do I replicate it now, My mind goes into do mode. It's like the doer kicks in, and I'm just like, all right, well. But yeah, anyway, so you have any insights? What kind of insights are you having? Anything really resonating with you? I would love to hear from you guys. Drop it in the comments. I may not respond to them, but I read every single comment that you all leave. Okay, now let's get into how it works, right? So now in his book, Dr. David Hawkins kind of gives a 3-step process, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm gonna add a 4th step. Number one is the part where I'm gonna add my own experience in. Number 1 is acknowledgement. Number 2, we've already talked about acceptance. Wait, no, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. We did talk about acceptance, but allow. Number 3 is accept. Number 4 is release. So this is how we do it. So like I said, part 1 was not, or step 1, whatever you want to call it. Step 1 was not in Dr. David Hawkins' book. I am putting that in there because for me, it started with acknowledging my own emotions because I didn't have a level of emotional awareness. So if you're anything like me and you're maybe still trying to navigate what your emotions are, then first step would be acknowledging. And I want to just quickly put a shameless plug in here. We just posted a few weeks back a couple different videos on essentially emotional awareness 101. We talk about some of the major mental mechanisms behind how we handle our feelings. And so if you're at the first level here, or the first part of it, just acknowledging your feelings, your emotions, then go check that video out because it'll offer you some insight on some of those major mechanisms: suppression, repression, escape, and expression. Right? That's all 4 of them. And then you can start to gain an understanding of acknowledging not just how you handle your emotions as an individual, but what emotions are starting to show up, right? Because again, for me, it was acknowledging the emotions came first before I could even allow myself to feel them. Most of the time when I was at this stage of acknowledgement, it would be something would happen, and then 6 hours later, I would meditate, and I'd be like, oh my God, that's what I was feeling. I was like, oh, okay, so now I'm acknowledging it. And it was a 6-hour gap. Then I pulled it down to 3. And then it was an hour. And then I was okay, a situation occurred at work. And then 5 minutes later, I was oh my God, I just felt kind of ashamed of myself. That was interesting. Okay, so anyway, step 1, acknowledgement. Number 2 is allowing. So again, I was sharing earlier, it's okay, you get into a tussle, a disagreement with a coworker. If you have an opportunity, get into a safe space, go to the bathroom, sit in your cubicle, and just like drop into your heart for a minute. Like, okay, what am I feeling right now? Okay, I'm feeling kind of ashamed, a little bit guilty for doing that wrong thing at work. You're allowed to feel ashamed. You're allowed to feel guilty in my body, and allow yourself, sometimes allowance comes through giving yourself permission. You know, if as a child, it wasn't okay for you to feel your emotions, and I'll take it a step further, feel your big emotions, what I've found at least is giving myself the actual permission has, on a deeper subconscious level, given me the opportunity to experience those emotions in their entirety. The more and more I do this work, the more and more these emotions come to the surface, and I allow them effortlessly, which takes us to step 3, which is accepting them. Like it's much easier for me to accept that I feel ashamed of myself. I feel guilty. I feel embarrassed. Right? A lot of these emotions, there's like, you shouldn't feel that way. Like you tell your coworker, like, I feel embarrassed for what I did today. Like, you shouldn't feel that way. You did everything you were supposed to do. It's the boss's fault. He did X, Y, Z wrong. It's the manager's fault. They did X, Y, Z wrong. It's the company's fault. And now what's happening is we're getting into a cycle with somebody else of not allowing our emotions. Okay, sure, maybe you're right. Maybe the boss is the problem, but I still feel embarrassed. And don't wait for somebody else to let you feel embarrassed. Give yourself permission. The more you give yourself permission, the more you allow, the easier it is to accept. And then the latter portion of this will just happen on its own. Like, even just saying that right now, I feel myself releasing something. I don't know what the fuck it is. So how we surrender is very simple. It's just not always easy, because a lot of the feelings or emotions we're harboring, we're carrying around with us, we've been carrying around for maybe a lifetime, maybe, who knows, a couple of lifetimes. You know, I'm definitely starting to expand my mind into believing that I have been around for, let me rephrase, I'm expanding my mind into believing that I have carried karma to this lifetime to surrender it. And so that aside for a moment, because I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole, we have to acknowledge, allow, right? Maybe you have to give yourself permission. Be the space, be your higher self in the moments where you're feeling the small self, to hold that space and allow yourself to feel what you have to feel. You may start to notice your mind resist it. Resistance is often in the mind. Resistance will hinder this part here, because the resistance in the mind will be like, oh, again, a coworker might say to you, or you may say to yourself, you shouldn't feel this way. You shouldn't feel that way. It's this person's fault. It's that person's fault. If you go into blame, if you go into shitting on yourself, you're probably resisting. Just allow. And if you find yourself here trying to allow, and you hear the resistance, you hear the mental judgment, you hear the opinions, notice the judgment instead. Notice the feelings, notice the judgment, notice the opinions. Instead, notice the resistance instead. You can hold the space for the resistance, right? If as a kid, you weren't allowed to feel embarrassed or ashamed, right? Like you were like, Mom, I feel like whatever. I feel ashamed of myself for this. And your parents, your mom, your dad, your teachers, your guardians didn't know how to help you process that, then it may not feel okay to allow that. So then the mental chatter kicks in, which makes it harder to accept. You can't accept. So then the next step would be, well, can we hold the space for the resistance? Can we hold the space for the judgment? And the answer is yes. So just notice your mental judgments. Notice your resistance and accept that instead. And release that, because we can't release the shame, the guilt, the trauma until we get the mental chatter out of the way. Once you get beyond the analytical mind, it's much easier to surrender the deep wounds inside of us. I think I'm gonna wrap it up there, y'all. So that is gonna be Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender. Highly recommend you guys pick up that book. I think it's like $12 on Amazon. Such a good read. If you get the audiobook, the author is pretty like blah, but I think it's actually more beneficial for the content in the book, but that's just my opinion. That doesn't really matter. So with that anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in today's video. Please, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like, comment, subscribe. If you took anything from this video, drop a comment down below. I would love to hear if you had any insights, anything that really showed up for you. I mean, I'm getting the chills right now as I say it, because like, I don't know, a lot of things are showing up for me right now, and I don't want to make this video any longer than this. So thank you guys so much, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace out.
So the rope touches my left heel.
With peppers, onions.
Circadian health. More importantly, we're going to be talking about your circadian rhythm.